Hey everyone, today we're going to discuss about the confidence level and sample size on population proportion. In our previous lesson, we've talked about determining the sample size but on the context of the population mean. This time naman, paano natin malalaman yung appropriate na sample size natin if we're going to estimate the population proportion. So the minimum sample size needed to estimate the population proportion is expressed using this formula. N is equal to P hat times Q hat times the square of the critical value over the margin of error. Remember, ang P hat, this means that it is the sample proportion, and Q hat, this means complement the sample proportion. And were able to arrive at this particular formula by deriving it on the formula for the margin of error on the previous lesson that we had, yung confidence interval yung of the population proportion. Di ba meron yung formula na E equals something something? We just solve for N there and we can come up with this. So, ang goal naman natin, malaman kung ano yung sample size na kailangan natin to estimate the population proportion. So, let us take a look at how we're going to do that with an example. Example here, Detective Diaz wants to investigate how much of the crimes are drug-related. A study from a different precinct shows that 42% of the crimes are drug-related. The study must be within 1% of the true proportion, rather. Using a 95% confidence level, find the sample size that Detective Diaz needs. So the first step that we're going to do here is we're going to determine the values of the variable. So, meron tayong sample proportion dito na 42%. So, it was derived from another study na napag-aralan na before. So, the sample proportion is 0.42. So, what will be the sample proportion of the complement? That would be Q hat is equal to 1 minus P hat. So, remember, complement lang siya. So, 1 minus 0.42, that's equal to 0.58. So, Q hat is equal to 0.58. That is the complement of the sample proportion. This is not necessarily the sample that we're going to have right now kasi, di ba, remember, we're just going to take the sample size pa lang muna, right? Di ba? So, yun. Hindi pa ito yung actual na sample na nakuha natin, but rather is a reference point from another study. Okay. Margin of error, that's the value of E. E equals 0.01. That's 1% right here. And the confidence level is 95%. Since we know that the confidence level is 95%, we can determine the critical value. That's our step 2. Remember, minimemorize lang naman natin yan. Confidence level is 95%. The critical value to be used is 1.96. Don't forget, memorize natin yung values na yun, ha? 90%, 1.65, 95%, 1.96, 99%, 2.58. Okay? Please don't forget that. So now that we have the critical value, P hat, Q hat, and the margin of error, we can substitute the values and solve for the value of the sample size n. Hindi ko pa na-arrange ito. Wait lang. Yan. So how do we do that? We have here n, the sample size, that's equal to P hat times Q hat times the critical value over the margin of error squared. So, P hat is 0.42. Q hat is 0.58. Nandito yan. 0.42, 0.58. 1.96, that's a critical value. 0.01, that is the margin of error. And we square the entire expression. If we compute that in our calculator, we will come up with this large value here of 9,358.138. If you remember in our discussion during the sampling distribution of sample proportions, mas kailangan talaga na mas marami yung sample size kapag proportion kasi mas naging accurate sila. As compared to kay population mean, pag 30, 40, 59 sample size, okay na siya because the central limit theorem comes into play there. It can actually reflect the population mean right away kapag ganon. Pero pag kay proportion, mas maganda talaga na mas marami talaga siya. So, so that it would be accurate to 1% of the true population. So, ang kailangang sample daw pala is 9,358. So, Detective Diaz needs to investigate 9,358 crimes and check kung alin doon yung drug-related. So, that's how we go around with determining the sample size needed in estimating the population proportion. So, that's it. Now, we're alam na natin kung paano kumuha yung sample size. In our next video, we're going to deal now with hypothesis testing. So we will come up with the basics of the hypothesis testing in our next lesson. So I hope you guys learned a lot today, and thank you guys for watching. See you guys on my next video.